How Esther's faith and courage saved her people from peril. Imagine this, a young woman, living in a world where the odds were stacked against her. With no power, no authority, and a secret that could cost her life. This is the story of Esther. But it's not just her story, it's ours, too. When we think about faith and courage, it's easy to romanticize them. But what does it really mean to have courage when the stakes are unimaginably high? Esther's story isn't just an ancient tale tucked away in scripture, it's a living, breathing example of how ordinary people like you and me can stand in the gap for something greater than ourselves. Have you ever felt small? Like your voice didn't matter? That's exactly where Esther started. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, in a foreign land where her people, the Jews, were seen as outsiders. If you've ever felt like the underdog, let this sink in. God often uses the most unexpected people to do the most extraordinary things. Now, let's pause for a moment and ask a deep question. What if the purpose of your life wasn't about achieving success, but about being placed in the right moment to make a difference? Would you have the courage to embrace it? Esther's moment came when King Xerxes of Persia, searching for a new queen, chose her. It sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? A common girl becomes queen. But this isn't a Cinderella story. Esther's rise to royalty wasn't about her comfort or prestige, it was preparation for her calling. You see, in the shadows of the palace walls, a dark plot was brewing. Haman, one of the king's highest officials, harbored a deep hatred for Mordecai and the Jewish people. Fueled by pride and revenge, he manipulated the king into issuing an edict to annihilate the Jews. Imagine the weight of that decree. Families destroyed, futures erased, hope extinguished. Here's the pivotal moment. Mordecai goes to Esther. He tells her about the decree and pleads with her to speak to the king on behalf of their people. But here's the catch, approaching the king uninvited could mean death, even for the queen. Let's pause here. Can you feel the tension? Esther was faced with an impossible choice: stay silent and save her own life, or risk everything for her people. How often do we face moments where doing what's right comes at a personal cost? Mordecai's words to Esther are unforgettable. He says, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" What about you? Have you ever considered that the very challenges you face, the very obstacles you're running from, might be the reason you're here? What if you were born for such a time as this? Esther could have let fear paralyze her. Instead, she fasted, prayed, and gathered strength, not just for herself, but for her people. And then she made her move. Imagine walking into a room where your very presence could be the end of you. The courage it took for Esther to approach the king is beyond words. But she didn't just walk in. She walked in with a plan. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet. Think about that. In the face of betrayal and evil, she responded with wisdom and grace. When was the last time you faced adversity with calmness and strategy instead of panic? At the banquet, Esther revealed her identity and the plot against her people. Her words carried not just truth but the weight of lives hanging in the balance. And in that moment, the king listened. Haman's evil plan was exposed, and Esther's people were saved. Let's take a step back. Esther didn't have superpowers. She wasn't born into privilege. What made her extraordinary was her faith, her courage, and her willingness to step into her purpose. even when it terrified her. Now, let's bring this home. What's your Esther moment? What's that thing in your life that feels too big? Too scary? Too overwhelming? What if you chose to trust? To take one brave step forward? Even if it felt impossible? Here's the truth, we all have moments when we're called to something greater. It might not look like saving a nation, but it could be standing up for someone who's voiceless, making a sacrifice for a loved one, or choosing integrity when it's easier to compromise. Ask yourself, if not now, when? If not me, who? Esther's story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite it. It's about trusting that there's a bigger picture, even when you can't see it. Let's end this part with a challenge. What's one step you can take today to step into your purpose? It doesn't have to be grand. It just has to be brave. The legacy of Esther, living a life of purpose amid chaos. As we continue Esther's story, it's important to ask ourselves, what does her legacy mean for us today? We're not living in ancient Persia, and most of us aren't faced with life or death decisions on a daily basis. Yet, the essence of Esther's journey, faith, courage, and purpose, resonates just as powerfully in the complexities of modern life. Think about the chaos in the world around us. Political division, economic uncertainty, personal struggles. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. But here's a truth we often overlook: chaos doesn't define us, how we respond to it does. Esther's life teaches us that our greatest impact often comes not in times of peace, but in the midst of upheaval. Have you ever noticed how people tend to underestimate their influence? We think, I'm just one person, what can I do? But let's take a step back. Esther didn't have an army or a position of political power when she changed the course of history. What she had was a willingness to step into her role, no matter how daunting it seemed. Let's pause and reflect. What role have you been avoiding because it feels too heavy or because you think you're not ready? What if you're more prepared than you realize? One of the most profound aspects of Esther's story is how she embraced her identity at the right moment. For most of her life, she kept her heritage as a Jew a secret. But when the time came to save her people, she didn't hide. She stood in her truth, fully aware of the risks. There's a powerful lesson here: hiding who we are might feel safe, but true impact only comes when we embrace our authentic selves. Now, let's connect this to our lives. How often do we shrink ourselves to fit in? How often do we downplay our values, beliefs, or dreams because we fear judgment? Esther shows us that courage isn't just about grand actions, it's about being unapologetically you, even when it's uncomfortable. As Esther revealed her identity to the king, she wasn't just advocating for her people, she was declaring, "This is who I am, and this is what I stand for." Imagine the freedom that comes with that kind of honesty. Imagine the ripple effect it could create in your own life. What truth are you holding back that the world desperately needs to hear? And let's not forget another vital part of Esther's story: the power of preparation. Before approaching the king, she fasted and prayed for 3 days. This wasn't a moment of impulsive bravery, it was a deliberate act of faith. How often do we rush into decisions without pausing to seek guidance? Esther reminds us that preparation isn't a sign of weakness, it's a foundation for strength. Here's a question to consider: when was the last time you truly paused to prepare for a challenge? Not just with plans, but with a sense of spiritual or emotional grounding. What difference could it make if you did? Esther's courage wasn't just for herself, it was for her people. This brings us to another profound truth: purpose is never just about us. When we step into our calling, it has a ripple effect that extends far beyond what we can see. Mordecai reminded Esther that deliverance for the Jews could come from somewhere else. But she had been placed in her position for a reason. In other words, she had a choice to make. And so do we. Think about the people in your life, your family, your friends, your community. What if your willingness to act, to step into your purpose, could change their lives for the better? What if the decisions you make today could impact generations to come? Esther's story also challenges us to think about the concept of timing. Mordecai's words, "For such a time as this," highlight the importance of recognizing the moments we're called to act. How often do we dismiss opportunities because they don't fit our plans or because we're waiting for the perfect moment? Esther reminds us that the perfect moment rarely exists. The right time is often the time we're given, even if it feels inconvenient or uncertain. Ask yourself this: what opportunities are you overlooking because they don't look the way you expected? What if now is the time to act? As we bring this part of the story to a close, let's consider one final thought. Esther's legacy isn't just about what she did, it's about how she did it. With faith, courage, wisdom, and humility, she changed the course of history. These qualities aren't reserved for biblical heroes, they're available to all of us, right now. So, what will your legacy be? When faced with challenges, will you choose fear or faith? Will you step into your purpose, knowing that the ripple effects of your actions might extend far beyond what you can see? Esther's story is a powerful reminder that we're all capable of extraordinary impact. Not because of our circumstances, but because of our choices. Living your Esther moment, unlocking courage and purpose in everyday life. As we conclude Esther's story, let's shift our focus to you, your life, your challenges, and your purpose. The beauty of Esther's journey is that it wasn't just a story of ancient heroism, it's a mirror reflecting the potential within all of us. Her choices, her courage, her faith, they hold timeless lessons for how we can navigate the complexities of modern life. Let's begin with a question that might hit close to home. What's holding you back from stepping into your Esther moment? Is it fear? Doubt? Or the belief that someone else is better suited for the task? Fear is a powerful force. It tells us we're not enough, that failure is inevitable, and that taking risks isn't worth it. Esther felt fear too. She knew the risk of approaching the king uninvited. It could have cost her life. But she didn't let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she leaned into her faith and chose courage. In today's world, courage often looks different. It's standing up for what's right when it's easier to stay silent. It's pursuing a dream that others deem impossible. It's forgiving someone who doesn't deserve it. Courage isn't always loud, sometimes. It's the quiet resolve to do the right thing, no matter the cost. Now think about your own life. Where could you bring more courage? Maybe it's in a relationship that needs honesty, a career move you've been hesitating to make, or a personal goal you've been putting off. Esther's story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. Faith is another cornerstone of Esther's story. But faith isn't passive, it's active. It's not just believing in a higher power, it's believing that your life has meaning and that your actions can make a difference. Esther didn't just pray and wait for a miracle. She prayed, prepared, and acted. Here's a challenging thought. What if faith isn't just about hoping things will work out, but about trusting that you're equipped to face whatever comes your way? How would that change the way you approach life? Faith and courage together are transformative. They allow us to step into the unknown with the confidence that we're not alone. They remind us that even when the path is unclear, every step forward matters. Let's talk about purpose. One of the most profound truths in Esther's story is that her purpose wasn't about her comfort or happiness, it was about serving others. In a world that often tells us to prioritize self-interest, Esther's story is a radical call to live for something greater than ourselves. Ask yourself, what's your greater purpose? What drives you to get up each morning? If you're unsure, what would it look like to start searching for it? Living with purpose doesn't mean you have to save a nation like Esther did. It could mean being a source of kindness in your community, raising children who know they're loved, or using your talents to make a difference in your sphere of influence. Purpose doesn't have to be grand to be meaningful. But here's the catch: purpose often requires sacrifice. Esther risked her life to fulfill her calling. What are you willing to sacrifice for yours? Comfort? Security? Approval? These aren't easy questions, but they're essential ones. Let's talk about the ripple effect of our actions. Esther didn't just save her people, she inspired generations to come. Her story has been told and retold for centuries, reminding us of the power of one person's courage and faith. Now, think about your own life. What kind of ripple effect are you creating? Are you building a legacy of love, kindness, and integrity? Or are you letting fear and complacency dictate your story? Here's the thing, your choices matter. Even the small ones. The way you treat others, the risks you take, the dreams you pursue, they all contribute to the legacy you're building. Esther's story ends with her people being saved. But her influence didn't stop there. Her courage became a beacon of hope and a testament to what's possible when we trust in something greater than ourselves. So, let's bring this full circle. What's your Esther moment? What's that thing in your life that feels too big, too scary, too overwhelming? Maybe it's a career shift, a broken relationship that needs healing, or a dream you've buried because it feels impossible. Whatever it is, what if you chose today to step into it with faith and courage? Remember this, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to feel ready. Esther didn't. All you need is the willingness to take the first step. As we wrap up, let's leave with one final question. What would your life look like if you stopped letting fear hold you back and started living with the faith and courage of Esther? What impact could you have on the world around you? Your story isn't finished yet. Just like Esther, you have a purpose, a calling, and a legacy to build. The question is, will you answer the call?